everyone, I am Jeff from Tabletop Toolbox, and I know I say this a good bit, especially here on my channel, but I am pretty excited for this video today. You see, I don't talk too much about my professional life. Most of what I do here revolves around board games for obvious reasons. But when I'm not here or out and about with my family and friends, one place I spend a good amount of time at is here. This is downtown Richmond, Virginia, and the headquarters of Dominion Energy. Now, Dominion is currently in the engineering and permitting stages of the Central Virginia Offshore Wind Project. This is currently the largest offshore wind power generating facility in North America, and when complete, it will generate 2.6 gigawatts.
What the hell is a gigawatt?
Of electricity here in the US, and that's enough to power over 650,000 homes. Now, my role on that project is the lead project planner, and my responsibility is to keep track of all the small independent pieces, all the different players on this nearly $10 billion project to try and make sure that we will be delivering power on time as promised to the various government agencies, our stakeholders, and of course our customers. Now, why am I boring you with all this nonsense? Well, today I'm excited because I get to finally mix my professional life with one of my favorite hobbies, and they will combine into Pampero. Pampero is a big, heavy Euro game designed by Julian Pombo, a native of Uruguay where a prevalent cold wind blows into the southern half of South America. That wind current is known as Pampero, and it's the theme and location of this 1 to 4 player game, where players will develop the infrastructure to generate and transmit renewable energy to the rural and urban areas of Uruguay. But alright, here's the deal. The Kickstarter for this game actually launched yesterday on Thursday, October 20th, so I'm a little late to the game here. But I've known that this game was coming. I actually tripped upon it online a few months ago, and I even had a chance to check this out at the Dice Tower Retreat this year. I also was fortunate enough to get myself onto a list to get a prototype that I could check out and talk about on my channel. So I'm really fortunate for that. Today I'm going to talk about how the game plays. I want to talk about how it feels to sit through a session of this game. I want to talk about some of the things that I think works really well, and maybe some of the things that don't. I'm not going to get too deep into the rules in this video. For one thing, there are already plenty of rules teach videos out there on YouTube for Pampero, and I just don't feel like going through all the setup and all the filming and all the editing for another rules teach video. I am going to give you, however, a brief overview, and let's do that now. Pampero uses card-activated action selection. It plays out over a somewhat varying number of rounds, maxing out at 7 for the base game. Each round will consist of players taking 3 actions, one at a time, and will end with a consolidation phase. Players will start with the same 8 cards, and those cards will let them build wind turbines to generate power, build transmission towers to move that power across Uruguay, and accept contracts, selling that power to customers spanning 5 other industries in the game. Players will manage their independent power company using this power grid and income board. This tracks the power currently available, the industries they're supplying power to, the money they're earning from each of those industries, the strength of their transmission system, and the contracts they've already accepted during the game. Now, at the end of each round, players will get to take one of their action cards off of this action board, and only the rightmost card on either of the 2 rows. That means that your options quickly dwindle as you play. To work around this, one of your available actions is to retrieve all of your cards from this board, but doing so advances you 1 spot on the time track of the game. Now, if every player does this just once during the game, then your game of Pampero will be 1 round shorter. Now, Pampero is a business management game. You start off with $25 and will use that money to build wind turbines, transmission towers, or establish transformer stations in order to accept contracts. But at the end of the game, the player with the most money, either left over or earned by their business, will be the winner. Now, there's a lot that I'm skimming over here, and to give you an idea of how much I'm skimming over, you should probably know that Julian, the designer of Pampero, has worked closely with Vital Lacerda, who is well known for making complex, branching Euro games with chain-reacting systems and tons of varied symbology. So, for example, in Pampero, you might build a transmission tower, placing it in a region. Then taking 2 bonus tiles from the electrical tower bonus board and placing them on your player board. These bonuses typically trigger immediately, so in this example you would trigger movement on an industry track, which in this instance would trigger movement on another industry track, and you would also accept a solar contract, which would go here on your power grid and income board, which would move you up another one of your industry tracks, which in this instance would reward you with a specialist card, giving you a new action to take on your future turns or a potential scoring card to trigger for yourself later in the game. Now, I am going to take a moment to dive just a little deeper into some of the systems of this game for some of the other topics that I'm going to get into. And the first one I want to talk about is the action selection board here in front of each player. Now, as I mentioned, you've got 2 rows that you'll be placing these cards in, and in most cases, you'll have 2 different regions of the board that you can trigger when you place a card in that slot. Now, the top row will let you play actions in the A and B regions, and in fact, the first 2 slots are only for the A region. The bottom row will let you play in the B and C regions, with the last 2 slots only being used for the C region. And this means that as you're going, you can actually kind of block yourself out of a region on a turn by just the way that you've organized the cards on your board. The second thing that I want to talk about is the power grid and income board, because there's a lot happening here and a lot of it is pretty crucial to the game. Now, I want to start first with these transmission towers as they're known in the industry, or electrical towers as they're called in the game. You'll start with one of these already built on the board, and you've got 6 more of these that you can place throughout the game. Now, each of the first 3 will unlock the different industries that you can then take contracts to sell your power to. The 4th one you place will unlock contracts in all of the C region, which is supposed to be sort of the urban center of Uruguay. The last 3 will give you various bonuses like extra power, another bulldozer which you can use to build, and giving you income on one of your industry tracks. Now, on the top of this board is your income tracker. So again, all 5 of these industries that you're selling to are represented up here with numbers underneath each column. And as you're taking contracts, you'll be moving these little markers up to tell you how much those industries are sort of paying you for your power at the end of every round, every consolidation phase. These are sort of unlocked as you play. So each tower that you play out, well, almost each tower that you play out will unlock another region of how much you can grow that income, but it's not perfectly clear here. You'll see that the first tower that is already on the board unlocks 4 columns of income on this track. The next tower doesn't add any additional income potential. The 3rd one adds another 3 columns. The 4th one doesn't add anything. The 5th one adds 2 more columns, and the last 2 add 1 column each. Now, underneath these towers are the transformers that you'll place on the main board, basically swapping it with a contract tile that will be placed in the space that that transformer came from. And these are unlocked on a 1-to-1 ratio for the towers at the top of each column. These are arranged in this kind of unique, almost like a maze, which is supposed to represent maybe an electrical grid or a wiring diagram. And so you have to start in the left column, placing one of these generators out on the board, and then you can continue to follow a few different paths, but again, you have to unlock each column by first placing the tower at the top on the main board. All right, so in the interest of time, I'm going to go a little off script and just talk about some of the things that I like and maybe some of the things that don't quite work for me in the game of Pampero. I've got my notes here I'm going to reference as I go. I'll try and keep this quick. First of all, my pros. I really like the fact that you've got those heavy Euro chain reaction mechanisms, as I've already talked about. They make you feel really smart when you can kick those things off, and they annoy the daylights out of the other players sitting around the table when they're watching you. Just, I get this, and then that triggers that. I'm going to grab one of these. I'm going to get one of these too. I get a couple of dollars. It makes you feel really smart. It is a lot of fun to do. You may not trigger as many of these off as you're used to in some of those real heavy Euro games, but they're definitely there. Up next, money. I really like the fact that money is a key resource in the game, but also the end game's victory condition. It makes you feel like you're investing in your business and hoping that those investments will come back with a positive return. It may not work for everyone. They're going to struggle to find out which systems really do pay out for them. And I think the answer is mostly in taking those contracts, also the international contracts that can give you a big influx of cash. It's interesting though, because not every big action you take will be the right thing to do. You'll say, well, I can spend $14 and put down a wind turbine and make a ton of energy, but maybe you never have a chance to sell that energy, and so you've really just kind of wasted that money. Also, you can get loans in this game as a way to sort of inject your system with cash early on in the game. These will usually cost you more by the end of the game than what you got from it, but again, it's an interesting system where, okay, you're going to be able to take that money and make it really cascade for you so that when you're paying it back at the end, you still have plenty of money left over to win. I really enjoy that system. There's another concept in this game that I don't know that I've mentioned, and that is the fact that when you are doing a construction action, you're using these little bulldozers to build your towers and to build your turbines. You don't need them to accept contracts. But there's a rule in the game that you can actually use another player's bulldozer to build your own component. You just pay the money to them instead of to the bank. Also, when you accept a contract selling your power, you can either use your own grid, i.e. your own towers, or you can use someone else's, again, paying the money to them. I think that's really, really neat, but I've never seen it done. I think that if you've got some experienced players, you're going to see a lot of competition for, okay, well, I really want to get to where you're at. Maybe I want to take the bonus of where you're at. I'll talk about that in a moment. And so you may see more of that, giving money to other players. But I'll also say this, my end game scores of my better games have ranged from about $112 to $140. These last actions are $14 in that C region, $14 to $17, which means you could be sliding more than 10% of someone's score across the table to them. So again, I don't know how that's going to pan out, and that's probably why I've never seen it done. We are always usually adverse to giving other people points in the game. But I think it's an interesting system, and I'm looking forward to seeing that played out. I do like the puzzle of this action board. The fact that you're putting down cards in these different regions, the fact that you only typically get one of those cards back is very interesting. It's very tense. It is not at all thematic. There's no caveat in the energy sector that makes us say, well, geez, we built wind turbines last week, so we can just never build any more of them again. That's weird, but it is a puzzle, and it's a challenge to make this work for you, and people find it interesting, if not a little frustrating. I also really like the components. This game, even in this prototype form, is gorgeous. I mean, these little towers and these turbines are just so neat looking, and folks look at these and they're just immediately excited to get them played out onto the board. Lastly, I really like the fact that this feels like an electrical industry game. You are putting down power generators, you're using transmission towers to move that power across the country, and then to get that power out to your actual customers, whether they're residencies, commercial buildings, industrial buildings, whatever they may be. Now, I did have a friend ask me, does this feel like a wind power game? And honestly, no, not really. I mean, they are wind turbines that you're placing out. You're not paying for fuel like in a game, say, of Power Grid, and that's really about it. There's really not much of a difference as to whether these were wind turbines or gas peaker plants or coal plants, whatever they may be. Still, the theme is there, and the electrical industry idea is there, and I really enjoy that I feel like I'm kind of playing what I do. But I do want to talk about some of the things that I'm just not quite sure feel right. And the first one is this action board, which I've already referenced. Now, again, you're in this game, you're placing out your cards here. You get to pick one of them, maybe two of them. I'll talk about that in a moment, back up. But it's a puzzle, and as I mentioned, it's not really thematic, but there's another aspect of this, and that is that one of the actions, as I've mentioned, is that you can pick up all the cards on this board and start over with a clean slate. A lot of other games do this. Games like Aquatica, Concordia is probably one of the first big ones. Spirit Island does this as well. And in all those games, there's usually a small benefit that you take when you do this, because you do kind of feel like it's a wasted action. Well, I'm not going to get to do anything. I just got to pick up all my cards and wait till my next turn. So Spirit Island gives you an extra card. I don't remember what Concordia does, but I think it lets you maybe grab an extra resource or get a little income of some kind. In this game, it's the complete opposite. You actually kind of feel like you're getting punished for doing this, and it's for two reasons. First of all, when you pick up all those cards, you move up a space on the time track, and if every player does this at least once in the game, you will lose an entire round of the game. You're going to lose 3 actions and a consolidation phase. You're going to lose 3 actions and an income in your game. It feels like the designer is telling you, hey, look, I don't really expect you to do this. You shouldn't be doing this. Maybe it means you're playing inefficiently. But not only that, now you're going to just lose more actions. You're going to have even less chances to be successful at the game. Another aspect of it, though, is that these actions actually have prices that get cheaper as you go. I'm not sure if that's quite accurate to the theme, but you do feel like your actions are getting a little more powerful because you're spending less money towards the end of the game. I mean, the last A action on the board is free. It's a $0 action. But if you have to wipe all those cards, you're maxing out all your prices again. You're starting over at the highest end of the board, and everything is going to cost you full price again. So this does feel a little punishing if you're not doing it right. All right, up next, I want to talk about some of the bonuses that come up in this game. And the first one is on this electrical tower bonus board. Now, there's a couple different tiles that you take. You take 2 of them whenever you put a tower out on the board, one of these transmission towers. And there's 3 of them in particular that I want to talk about because most of them are pretty simple. They move you up a track. You may grab maybe a couple of batteries or some energy points, but that's going to be about it. But 3 of these are pretty powerful. The first one is on the A grid, and it's going to let you, in the consolidation phase, pick up any one of your cards that you want, not just the rightmost one. This is really useful if you're thinking, well, gosh, I really need to get a contract accepted in the next turn, but all my contract cards are buried. But instead of having to wipe all of my cards and go through all that, I'm just going to yoink out that one card that I need, and now I'm set up for my next turn. The next one in the B grid lets you pick up 2 cards during the consolidation phase instead of just 1. And this is huge. Honestly, it's this player that probably has the best chance of not ever having to wipe their board and keeping your game at its maximum length. But if you combine these 2 together, and I don't quite know how they gel together, I'm not sure if you would get to pick 2 cards from anywhere on your board or maybe just one, and the other one has to be the rightmost, doesn't really matter. But if a player manages to get both of these, they're going to be pretty unstoppable. They'll never have to wipe their board. They're going to keep their prices cheap. They're going to get every action available to them in the game, and they're probably going to wreck shop. But the last one I think is even more powerful. It's over here in the C grid, and this one lets you build 2 wind turbines with every wind turbine construction action. And I even had to reach out to Julian to make sure that we were playing this correctly. And he verified that with that tile, you play the card to build a wind turbine. You only pay the cost once, but you put 2 on the space and you get double the energy. Now, if you use this in the C region, you're going to get at least 8 units of energy, which is more than half of what you can even fit on this grid, which you cannot go over the range of. That's really powerful. It's a ton of electricity that then you can fill a bunch of contracts with, or the very expensive C contracts, which give you a ton of bonuses, a ton of movement on the income track. And honestly, of the 4 games that I have played of Pampero, every time the player who has had this token wins the game. And I think that means it's just a little too strong. Now, with some experienced players, they may see, if you go and you're going for that bonus, which you can get this tile on the second turn of the game, you can. And I think if a experienced player sees that you're going for it, they can pay to use your bulldozer and put your tower out, put that tower out there and grab this in front of you. And that would be interesting. I would like to see how that works. Again, if you've got a bunch of experienced players, there's a better chance of that push and pull, that sort of race to play out in front of you. But I think these are, in of themselves, really, really OP. Up next, I want to talk about these specialist cards. These come in 2 different flavors. There's one set that just go into your hand, and there are additional actions that you can play throughout the game. That might be a way to sort of forego that wiping the board action and keeping yourself in the game. These other ones that come out are scoring cards. You can use them at any of the 3 scoring rounds, but you only get 1 shot out of them. So you can use them early in the game to give yourself a little injection of cash, or wait until the end game when they might be worth a little extra money, which of course, again, is points at the end of the game. But these things are not created equal. Some of them are much stronger than others. You get a card that lets you play another wind turbine with a built-in bonus, and that can be real nice if you've buried your wind turbine cards in the game or in your board and you're trying not to pick everything back up. But there's another card that just lets you reuse one of your permanent bulldozer bonuses, which might give you 2 batteries or 3 energy, which is way less than you could get from another wind turbine tower itself. So they're not equal. They feel very frustrating when you're looking at these. There's only 3 of them out. You can grab one off the top of the deck, and it may still not be a very good one for you. And yet the guy across from you just got the one that gives him a bunch of money for having loans at the end of the game. It basically pays off his loans for him. And you're going to be really frustrated that you're going to get $10 and he might get 20. So the next thing I want to mention real quick is this turn order track. And this thing is, well, there's 3 levels to it, right? You've got the time track that dictates how many turns everyone's going to take in the game. You also have the turn order track. This thing gets adjusted based on the position of tokens on the time track. But people who are on the bottom row of this, they get to trigger off first. They get their pawns organized in player order first, and then the top row gets organized after that. The time order track will basically swap every round. Whoever's on top will then flop down to the bottom. And this means that in a 4-player game, if you were first in the last round going into a consolidation, you'll then be last in the first turn after consolidation. That means you got to wait 7 turns until you get to go again. And all of this means Nothing. In all the games that I've played of this, I have never seen anyone anxious about the turn order. I've never seen any benefit to being able to go first, except for the fact that I just get to go, and I've been sitting there waiting for my next turn. This is complication for the sake of complication. I don't see any benefit to it. I think you could very easily just put one token on here and say we're going to play 7 rounds, and you're going to go first, and we're going to just go clockwise around the table every turn. I think you would do just fine with those rules. The last thing I'll mention real quick is replayability, because I'm not sure how much of it is in this game. Your international contracts change out each round, but these things have very, very minor differences between the cards. Your endgame scoring tiles, there's a bunch of those in the bag, and there are some more in the stretch goals of the Kickstarter campaign going currently. And this is probably where the bulk of your variety is. It's just going to tell you what to work for at the end of the game. And, again, that's where everyone's kind of fighting for the same stuff, and it gets a little bit more competitive. But I think mostly you're going to see the game evolve with the players around the table. The more often that you play this with the same group or experienced players in general, the more of that kind of infighting and competition and that sort of race to get the stuff you may see. Heck, maybe that's when the turn order becomes a bit more prevalent. But I think other than that, there's just not a whole lot that changes. These contract tiles that sit on the board are actually numbered. They go in a specific location each time. So you know where everything's going to be at from game to game. There's just not a whole lot that changes. Now, there is an expansion that is listed on the Kickstarter page. I don't know anything about it. We haven't gotten any information about it. I'm curious to see what that might add to it. And of course, I'm curious to see what else might come out for Pampero. But I think the players are going to evolve necessarily more than the game will. All right, I've probably rambled on enough now about Pampero by Julian, Pombo, and Ape Games. And I know I've been all over the map with this video, but look, I have worked in the energy sector for nearly 14 years straight, and I really enjoy playing big, heavy Euro games. And maybe those two realities combined, and maybe for the production of this video, is why I have played this game more than any of my other Lacerda titles, which honestly kind of bums me out a little bit. I should get those back to the table. But in the meantime, I hope that my opinions have helped you decide whether or not this is the right game for you. I hope the best for Julian and his team, and I look forward to seeing what's coming out next for Pampero. I mean, of course I'm going to end up with a copy of this game. It's a wind energy game, and I've got a whole team of colleagues that I'm going to do my best to introduce it to. Until then, I'm going to head off wherever the wind takes me next. Cheers.